Hello, ngHouston. I am super excited today. Well, I have a new office, by the way, you might have noticed, but that's not why I'm excited. I'm excited because we have a really great panel today, and we have a really great guest today, and we have a really great topic today, and we're going to have so much fun. I'm going to introduce the panelists first. Maybe I should introduce the guest. No, I'm going to introduce the panelists first because I always do. But we're going to have a lot of fun today. So I want to introduce Mike Brocky first, because you're our special surprise panelist. Mike Brocky crashed our party when he found out who the guest was and who our topic was. So sorry, it wasn't my choice. Mike Brocky comes when he wants to, you know.
Well, when I'm allowed to.
You always have a standing invitation. You are welcome every single episode if you can.
I appreciate it. Yeah, Cypress is something that's near and dear to my heart because I'm using it in a partially Angular context.
Okay, now no spoilers though, because I haven't even, all I know is everybody's talking about Cypress. I know it's related to unit testing, but I don't know why it's so cool. And so don't tell me yet, because we're gonna get into that. And speaking of spoilers, Amir, you want to say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Amir Rustamzadeh. I'm one of the engineers on the Cypress team, and I mostly work on the back-end side of things. I'm happy to be with you all today to talk about Cypress some more.
We're so excited to have you. And y'all, just so you know, I just invited Amir less than half an hour ago, and he jumped in, and which is so cool, so cool. I really appreciate you joining us on short notice, and I wish I had thought to invite you a long time ago because you're really great. You're amazing and really nice, and I like you.
Thank you. Happy to do it.
And we have Connie is kind of jumping in and out, I think having some audio video problems. Connie's been an ngHouston friend for a while, and so we'll see how that goes. But in the meantime, we're going to keep moving. And I am very proud to introduce my guest, who's one of my favorite people and super, super fun, and also a good friend. Say hello, Jesse Sanders.
Hey, everybody. I'm super excited to be here. Gosh, I just got back from India, and I was there at the end of February, and now just trying to get back from jet lag and everything else. And I was out at a 10-day course in California. So I literally just got back on Sunday, but super excited to be here and talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is Cypress IO. So Cypress is very near and dear to my heart, and we'll get into it in a little bit here. But yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to have Amir here, no pressure. Let's bring someone from the Cypress team. So this is great. Maybe I can even learn some stuff here today. Also, it's always great to have Mike Brocky on a cast with or be anywhere near him. So much knowledge, great guy, and super excited that he's going to be coming out to Angular Denver this August. So that's really exciting for me as well.
And Justin,
hold on, I got to call you on this. We're supposed to be kissing up to you, not you to us. So you've got that totally backwards right now, my man.
You guys are just y'all are all my favorite people and so much fun. And you two and Schwarty in Denver is going to be lit. It's going to be
lit. That is huge thumbs up. I'm so excited. Great speakers and just so much knowledge. And I just, yeah, you're right. It maybe should be the other way, but it's just me, man. I'm so grateful to be here and have both of you on here and have Connie on here as well. I've not met Connie yet, so great opportunity to meet new people. And let's dig into some Cypress. So
yeah, do you want to? So what do you have for us? You have slides or a demo, or you're going to show us, or you're going to tell us how is this going to work?
Yeah, what I'd like to do is walk through some slides and talk a little bit about end-to-end testing, and I think it's important for people to understand why the protractor WebDriver Selenium model doesn't really work. So I think a lot of things that people wonder is why should I be switching from a technology like protractor over to Cypress? And I think it's important to understand why this is necessary, what Cypress solves, and then we can dig into, hey, how do we install Cypress? We can look at some simple examples on this, and we can get into some of the more advanced features like stubs and then what happens when we're running it in a CI environment. So that's what I'd like to talk about. And then anything else that Mike and Amir want to add, totally happy to, have them jump in on this at any time.
Sure thing.
Okay. And so yeah, share your screen and show us. I'm going to grab some popcorn and sit back and learn about Cypress.
All right. Let me pull this up here. And let's go to screen share.
And if you're watching on YouTube, remember we love questions and beginners, and it's okay if you don't know, if you haven't seen this before, just drop questions in the chat and then we'll try to get them answered live if we can.
All right. Can it, go ahead.
Before you get started, are we good to interrupt your slides with questions, or do you wait till after?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just jump in and hey, I got a question. No problem at all. We'll stop and we'll jump into that.
Cool.
So.
And be nice, Mike, and behave yourself.
Yeah, be nice.
I'll try.
All right. So the title of this talk is I'm so done with end-to-end testing, because I think this is where a lot of developers are coming from. That end-to-end testing historically has been very, very frustrating and really a problem for all of us. So really quick about myself, this is how you can reach me. This is my real email address. So if you email me, I will respond to you. You can also reach me at Twitter at JesseS_Breebug. So who am I? I'm an Angular GDE, and mostly I travel the country and occasionally get to travel the world and speak about Angular topics and how to build enterprise systems. So my question usually to people is, who's writing end-to-end tests? And what's funny about this is that usually it's at least half the room or maybe more. And then, the question then is like, who's actually having fun writing end-to-end tests? And usually it's about maybe one or two people, if any. So I think we've all felt the pain of dealing with end-to-end tests. The test tools out there are, Selenium, WebDriver, Protractor, Nightwatch. There's some other ones out there. But I think the thing for people to understand is that they're all really basically just Selenium. They're based on Selenium, a technology that was developed in 2004. It has evolved over time, but it's still basically the same premise. End-to-end testing is hard. Traditionally here, the tests take way too long to run. They fail intermittently. They're very flaky. Tests that passed yesterday just start failing intermittently for no reason. We end up having to deal with all these timing issues, and then from that we're creating these really bizarre hacks on waiting for elements to show. And basically what ends up happening is that developers just give up and say, forget it, I'm done. They'll have a suite of tests. And what typically happens is either they turn off the tests or they just ignore the results of those tests. And so that's not really bringing us any value. We've spent a lot of time developing these tests, and then they're just not reliable enough. They take too long. It's just too much of a headache. So this is what end-to-end tests traditionally kind of feel like to me. It's just like this mess. Imagine if someone came in and said you had to clean up this, and you had to do it in like an hour or two. It's like mission impossible. And that's kind of what end-to-end testing feels like. If we think about web applications in the old days, and this is a little bit before 2004, but if you remember what GeoCities is, this is a GeoCities basic example site here, but it was a really simple time. Basically everything, when we made a request for a page, everything was generated up on the server. It came down, and then all we need to do is, if we're going to test it, we go find the thing with an H1, and we could select that, and we could do our basic testing. But now we've got all sorts of other technology going on. So instead of having server-side rendering and full page refreshes, now we have either jQuery with AJAX calls or some other sort of client-side MVCs that are occurring, whether it be Angular, React, Vue, Ember, whatnot, that are interacting with the page and changing elements on the fly, which makes a great web experience, but makes a really difficult time than using tools that were designed for server-side rendering testing, to be able to test that what was rendered from the server, and now it's come down to the client, that weren't really made to handle the super interactive UIs that we now have. So you're wondering, like, why am I on Amazon and showing this? Well, this to me this is Amazon.com, right? And this represents more of the modern web. So we have a whole bunch of different panels here that are all getting loaded independently, and a whole bunch of stuff that we don't even see that's kind of behind the scenes that's getting loaded. And so what the problem with this is that these things they all get requested about the same time, right? But they're going to come in at disparate times. We don't know exactly when they're going to arrive, and hence becomes the problem. So the challenges with that is, think about when you go to do end-to-end testing, and you're using a tool like Selenium, you're dealing with a snapshot at a moment in time. And so when I begin to write a test, I'm typically, what I'm doing is I'm selecting an element. Let's go back over to this page here. I'm selecting an element on this page and saying, I think when the recently viewed shows up, I should have everything else. Traditionally, it's the slowest to load because of the routine that's going on in the background. And so I'll do a wait for element, for this thing to show up and have content in it, and then pray that then the rest of the content around it has already come in. That's this whole snapshot at a moment in time. And I'm trying to figure out, when is that the best moment for me to start to begin to test my UI. The other really big issue here is what I call either magic data or seed data. Seed data is having a database that's already got a whole bunch of data in it that helps us test our edge cases. The challenge with this is that as we run tests, then the seed database is no longer valid potentially, and we have to make sure that it gets refreshed. We also then have to have seed data for any new tests and get that added to it, and it's scripted, and that becomes a bit of a hassle as well, as trying to manage that seed data. Basically, we end up with a team of either a developer or a couple developers that are just managing this sort of seed data stuff to make sure that our tests are running and whatnot. The other scenario is magic data, or basically create data on the fly so that I can hit my edge cases. So I'll give you an example. Let's say we've got a screen that is going to only display a panel if the product inventory count is less than 10. So either I have to try to locate a piece of data and find it, find that product that has an inventory less than 10 so that I can see if that panel displays. And then I probably didn't want to update the product inventory amount to over 10 so that now that product, that panel now goes away, right? So the problem with that is now I'm having to do a whole bunch of work to write additional steps in my test to go create the data so that it's available in the form that I need it, so I can accurately test my edge cases. So what this does is this just increases the amount of time that the tests take to run, and also increase the probability of having an error occur during the tests because of some sort of timing issue. Also, the other really big challenge is the cryptic errors and stack traces that Selenium and those derivatives typically display for us. They're tough to decrypt. It's tough to understand what the problem is. And it's almost impossible to really figure out what happened and why it failed, and especially in a CI environment. Another big problem here is there's no dev tools during tests being run. So basically Selenium takes over everything, and the dev tools are no longer available. That resource is being actually used by Selenium to do this. And again, when I say Selenium, I'm saying Selenium WebDriver Protractor. So the Chrome dev tools aren't available there. So it makes it more difficult to try to figure out what's going on, what's the selector, how many elements are available, that sort of stuff. So here is a typical error stack trace. This is pretty bad. It's difficult to figure out. You can see there, cannot read property header printer of undefined. It's referencing the protractor. No, so node modules, protractor console. This is very difficult to work with, right? So again, this is all leads to the challenges and whatnot. And it really leads me to this. End-to-end testing sucks.
You can hear it in your voice when you look at that. It's like, oh, great. This is going to be fun.
This really feels like the mess that I've been in, and especially since I've invested so much time to try to wire everything up perfectly. And at the end, when I have 1,000 tests that are testing my UI and it should be providing tremendous value to me, instead I end up in this tangled web of garbage that is no longer reliable.
Because you're such a joyful person to hear you go, oh, I don't like this.
Yeah, I've actually gotten to the point where I tell people, don't write end-to-end tests. If anything, write more unit tests and write some basic smoke tests to make sure your integration points are there. Because if they're not going to be valid, if you're not going to be able to use them to accurately test your UI, then there's no point in spending a lot of time on creating a mess like this.
I feel like you hit a nerve with Amir because he's over here nodding.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we definitely don't want to be in a place where it's too difficult to actually write end-to-end tests, because it's really the only true type of test that is going to simulate your user's behavior, their actual behavior. Yeah.
But there's a better way, or is this just the most depressing episode of ngHouston ever?
This is the most depressing. No,
this is just the start. He's not done yet. He hasn't introduced Cypress.
So, hey, let's talk about Cypress. I am so excited by Cypress. When I first heard about it, I was like, that's not possible. That doesn't exist. That would be great, but that doesn't exist. And then I started playing around with it. It was like, wow, this is unbelievable. This is so much cleaner, so much easier. So
wait. What was it that you said when you first heard that doesn't exist? What doesn't exist? What is it that you can't do?
A tool like this doesn't exist. This isn't possible. If it would have been possible, it would have been here already. That was sort of my mentality. It's like, this sounds too good to be true.
That's awesome.
Because it is so easy. So easy to get moving, started, get examples, and we're going to get into all this in just a second here, but
I'm getting kind of excited about this.
You should be. You should be very excited, because this is going to change how you write tests and change your effectiveness. So for testing, this is the bee's knees. I put it right up there. My two favorite libraries right now are Jest.js and Cypress for doing testing. Between the two of those, I can test anything that I need to be able to test within my Angular application, and I can do it easily, quickly, and reliably be able to run those tests and know that I know that my application's working.
Oh yeah? Let me see.
All right, let's go. So setup's easy, authoring's easy, running the tests are easy, debugging the tests are easy. So the setup is so easy. All you have to do is just npm install Cypress, and then save it locally. So -- save dev, great. We got it saved locally. And then I can use, if I've got npm version 5.2 or greater, I can use this command npx, which is to execute. This way I don't have to go find it in the dist folder or in the node modules, Cypress dist folder, whatnot. I can just say npx Cypress open, and it goes ahead and launches the Cypress console. Or there's another way you can do it. You can use our schematic, which is npm install -g. You can go ahead and install the Breebug Cypress schematic. So we create a schematic for this to make it even easier to be able to install Cypress into an Angular project. And then I can just say, okay, I want to go ahead and add the schematics to my project. The first one, I believe, just installs it globally, and the second one actually adds it. And so we wanted to make it really, really easy to set it up. Also rip out all the protractor stuff that I don't need anymore. So it really just helps clean up the project, make things work really easy. So it's a really pretty simple schematic.
Have you considered combining those last two steps into an ng add schematic?
You know what? That's a good question. And
that's brand new functionality.
Yeah.
Combining two steps into one. Because
I'm
lazy.
I like that. I'm lazy too. So what I'm going to do is, as soon as we get off here today, I'm going to go talk to my developers and say, hey, let's change this, and let's go ahead and combine those.
Magic happens right here, y'all.
All right.
One thing I like to add here is that, doing npm install Cypress is all you need to really get started, as opposed to, in other tools, like you might need to go install other plugins and other add-ons or so on, or do any other type of configuration. But, before I even joined Cypress and I was using Cypress, this is the part that I really enjoyed. You just npm install Cypress, and then you have like everything you need to get started writing tests. There's no additional configuration or other installation required.
That's a really great point, because with every other tool out there, there's definitely a few more steps. There's configuration, trying to get all this stuff set up to run, where Cypress was just so easy to get it started. You can add this to any project and get it up and running in just a matter of like minutes. So really seconds, as fast as you can get everything downloaded, as fast as your pipe is to bring it down, bam, you're set up. You can start running. So it's really nice on the setup. So when we go ahead and do our NPX Cypress open, there's the screen, the console that comes up, and this console here then shows us what tests we have locally. So you're going to notice in your project when you first install this, there's going to be a whole bunch of tests that are already there. So these are all examples. Really great example code of how to do any sort of actions, how to deal with files, local storage, navigation. They're all sorts of really nice tests and give me a great starting point for writing my tests. So I recommend to people dig through the examples, take a look at them, run them, understand, what's going on with this. Anything to add there, guys?
Yeah, these examples, they come up with any empty Cypress project. And as Jesse just said, if you're new to Cypress, please go over these specs. I mean, it's really gonna give you a nice quick rundown of all the various Cypress commands that are available to you. And also, people coming from other frameworks, they might not be used to writing tests like we do in Cypress. So this is also a great way to kind of see how Cypress tests even look like in the first place.
Yeah. Now all these tests are also available at examples.cypress.io. Is that correct?
Yes, this is part of our Cypress example kitchen sink repo, which you can find on GitHub. And they're all there with additional documentation. And we even have example CI configuration that Gleb Balmatov has spent a lot of time putting together. So if you're also interested in figuring out how things work in CI, also check out that same example kitchen sink repo.
Excellent. All right. So once we go ahead and click the run all specs, or if I click on a particular spec, it's going to go ahead and launch. It's going to go ahead and pull up a Chrome browser, and over on the left-hand side, we can see everything that's occurring. So we're visiting a website. So in my case here, I'm visiting a site called ngdoc.io, and stepping through, I can see every XHR request that's going on. I can then, you see where I'm going and getting the input that has a ID of keyword, and I'm typing NGRX, pressing enter. I really like this syntax. So anything I want to do, like pressing the enter key, the delete key, whatnot, I just surround it with braces there, and it's just a really nice syntax for doing that. You can see once I press enter, we go ahead and have another XHR request. Over on the right-hand side, what's beautiful is that this is where I can actually see the test run, and I can watch it as it's going. I can then click on each one of these steps that we're doing, and I can see what the state of it is at that exact moment. The very top toolbar there, I get some feedback on the number of past tests, the number of failed, how long it took to run, and also I can kick it back off to run again. So I can go ahead and refresh those tests and rerun. So this console here, super nice to work with. I believe I can also then pull up dev tools from this point here, and I can with the dev tools, I can select elements over here and see what my selectors look like and if I'm missing anything. So there's also a whole bunch of built-in libraries that are built directly into Cypress. So if you're used to using sign-on or jQuery, you want to use underscore. There's stuff also for blob, mini match, moment, promise. All those libraries are built directly into Cypress. So I don't have to go out and pull those in. So that's just less configuration that I need to do, less steps that I need to do to get my tests up and running very quickly. All those things are built in, automatically brought in, and very easily accessible from Cypress. So another thing that really impressed me is how easy it is to do screenshots and videos. So in Cypress, I can specifically request a screenshot, but if I'm running it from a console, I don't even have to request a screenshot. I don't have to go in and say, hey, we have a failed test. Let's go ahead and get a snapshot of this right before the failing spot is, so that we can see what's going on. Now, automatically, when I run it, when I run Cypress and not in the interactive mode, it's automatically going to take screenshots and take videos. It's going to compress those videos for me and place them in a folder so that I can view them later. So this is very useful, especially if I'm using something like Circle CI or whatever my CI tool is that I can then go ahead and log into the server, be able to look at those, get those videos and watch actually what was occurring at the time of the error. So authoring tests. So as we mentioned earlier, examples are added to every single project when we do the install for Cypress. You can go to example.cypress.io as well. You can see those same examples out there. Their authoring is really easy and logical. We'll take a look at an example here. So I really like the way that this is laid out, and I think this makes a lot of sense to people that come from a testing background. That the unit test way is I'm gonna totally fart on this, mind fart. Basically 3 steps where we're setting up the tests, we've got our action, and then we're doing our assert. And so this here has a very similar sort of method, which is we're gonna visit, we're gonna query, we're gonna have an action, and then we're gonna should for that. So in our case here, before each, we're going to go ahead and we're going to visit using our Cypress. So CY, that is our global variable for Cypress. We're going to visit. In our case here, we're visiting the example Cypress.io commands actions. So this is actually one of the tests directly from the example code. And then our test here is going to be, once the before each is done, we're going to focus on a DOM element. So we're going to get the element that has a class of action focus. We're going to focus on it, and then we're going to assert that it has a class of focus. And then we're going to look at the previous element, and it should have the attribute style color orange. So the previous command is the same one as what you'd use in jQuery. So you see here, the tests are very simple. They're very logical. It's very easy to get in and select an element using standard selectors that we all know from basically CSS selectors. And then the commands like being able to focus or blur or click, really simple to do. So here, a few more actions here to describe for you. So again, we're going out to the same exact site, and then I'm getting the button. I'm clicking it. I can also double click it. I can get the input with keyword. I can type in it. I can then clear the value out of it. I can find another input. I can focus. I can blur. I can check and uncheck check boxes. So you can see it's very intuitive. It's very easy to use. There's not a whole lot of new syntax that you need to learn. I find that when people start working with it, that it's such a simple syntax that they latch onto it very quickly and come up to speed on it.
Yeah, well, one thing I should mention is that the syntax and the API overall is very English-like. And as you're typing, and if you assume that a certain command is supposed to do something, you're probably right. You can almost guess the API at a certain point. And if you have like TypeScript and things like that enabled, then you get auto completion and everything still. But yeah, the API is very natural, and that's one of the reasons why so many people pick it up really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. What's nice here as well is that it supports on assertions, both implicit and explicit subjects. So here we've got basically very similar code here. The first one, we're getting the header anchor, and we're using the implicit where we say it should have a class of active and have an attribute href pointing to users. We could do the same exact thing where with an explicit subject where we'll say, okay, we're going to go ahead and get it, and then assert that it should, and then we're using a big arrow function here, and we can be more explicit and say, I expect that this element that we selected to have a class of active, and that it to have an attribute the same. So whatever you're more comfortable with, I like the fact that it supports either way. I know some developers prefer, one or over the other for their style guides within their companies. And so I like the flexibility there. All right, handling errors. So I showed you the stack trace earlier, which was a pretty normal stack trace from a Selenium-based test tool. The great thing about Cypress is that there's no more cryptic errors. The the output's super simple to read, and there's even hints about what the problem could potentially be. So here is a really blown up version of an error. So we're having a problem on the visit command. We're trying to load localhost 4200. Notice there's no stack trace. I don't have to try to, weave through this thing. I can just read this. It's pretty just much like plain English. So we attempted to make an HTTP request, but it failed. We received this error, and then here's our hints. Either I don't have internet access, I forgot to run or boot my web server, which was the case for me, or my web server isn't accessible, or have some weird network configuration settings on your computer. So I can also get to a partial stack trace for this as well. So it's really nice. I don't have to try to dig through a stack trace and figure out what went wrong. I get really plain English on what's happened here. So,
and since you mentioned error messages, and this will be coming in an upcoming version of Cypress, but our test runner team has been working really hard on improving these error messages. We see a lot of value in improving how we convey messages to users, and it's probably one of the most important things Cypress does, just telling you what went wrong, and then how can we go about helping you get it fixed. So be on the lookout for a much more improved error messaging, like displaying essentially.
Hey, Amir, if you could go to the team that's working on that and just give them a big hug and tell them that we love them.
For sure. I'll send your regards to them. No problem.
And Jesse, do we have time for a quick question from James?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and also, first of all, Mike Bechtel said that you blew his mind with the Cypress super test because he did not know about that. And James wants to know, can Cypress be used to test a component or custom control in isolation, or is this just not a use case for Cypress? Very good question.
Yeah, that it's really not built for that. If you want to test it in complete isolation, it would Cypress is going to be hitting directly against a web page, versus if you want to be able to test it in isolation, then basically you're doing a unit test, but you're only interacting with the HTML elements. That basically give you the same what you're looking for. If you have the component on a single page, you'd be able to test that component basically in isolation, because you can control. We haven't talked about this part yet, so James is getting me to jump ahead a little bit, but we can control everything that's going in and out of or into that component. So in effect, we can test it in isolation, but it's not true isolation. It will actually be while it's on the web page with other components. Anything to add to that, guys?
No, but that, just to be clear, that's one of the use cases that I'm running through right now is to test components in isolation with air quotes.
You should go pair with James Dutton. You guys could be buddies. He's very cool.
Yeah, we're creating web components using Stencil, but what we've done is created sample applications or sandboxes to test other frameworks to make sure that the web component we're creating works in Ember, works in AngularJS, works in Angular, works in React, those types of things, and just running, hopefully, or ideally, we haven't gotten there yet, the same test suite against all the different sandbox environments to make sure that it behaves as expected in all those different environments.
Also to add with regards to component testing is we also have an unofficial set of component testing libraries for Cypress. We have them for pretty much every single framework out there, including Angular. So if you're interested in testing components in isolation with Cypress, check those out. You can type in Cypress Angular unit test, and it will come up in your search. So check those out, and that might be helpful. As I said, they're currently unofficial, but we have big plans for making component testing a first-class citizen in the Cypress realm, because we kind of see that as the future, as web applications are more componentized.
See, I knew I was going to learn something today.
Right? Yeah. I'm so glad you jumped in with us, Amir, at the last minute. You're so great.
No problem.
I mean, I knew this was going to be one of my favorite episodes because Jesse, but now it's like we're learning all kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah, and all the libraries are open source, so check them out. If we get more feedback, we'll keep improving them. And our new kind of working style is kind of like we'll probably have a repo, unofficially, as like an experiment, and then people can come and give us feedback. And if we find something interesting, we'll find the right way to incorporate it back into the core.
This just makes us all love you guys even more.
Awesome.
Right. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us. That's great. All right. Can everybody see my screen again here with VS Code?
Yes.
All right. Awesome. So the end-to-end testing here, this folder here, this is Protractor. This is the old stuff. This is what our schematic removes. You can see here, this is Cypress. So this is just doing a npm install of Cypress. I wanted to show you guys what gets added in here. So you can see fixtures. This is where our tests go. Or I'm sorry, this is where we're going to jump to we're going to get to this in a minute. Our integration is where our test goes. This is where all of our example code is at. Here's plugins where we can add additional plugins here. Here's the screenshots and the videos. So in our case here, we had some failing tests that we're running. Actually, I was running these in the non-console. So here's my two videos. And then there's a support folder. So really the main two that you're going to get involved with is the integration folder is the main one. So we talked about creating a sample test, and here's the first sample test, and basically just going out to our website. So all I have here is just a standard Angular CLI project, and I can go ahead and just go ahead and visit that on localhost 4200. So it's really that simple to be able to write a test and get going. So I just wanted you guys to see the folder structure, what you'd kind of expect here. So that's this test here. In our case here, what I'm doing is I'm just removing the example test, and then I'm just creating a new file, the homepage spec. And here is the test being described, the same thing that we saw right over here. So that's our first test. It's very simple to run. If I come over here and say npx, right in the right spot, there we go, npx Cypress open. Oh, that's what I thought. It's putting it to the other screen. Can I? That's interesting.
What's going on, Jesse?
It's on my other screen on my MacBook, but not on the monitor in front of me, and it won't let me drag it up.
You might be in full screen somewhere.
I am in full screen right here.
That's
take that off full screen. Oh, that.
I've had that problem before.
Yeah, I'm like it just keeps stopping. All right, so there's the Cypress window that comes up immediately right away. It tells me that cannot verify the server set my base URL. So one of the things we have here is a Cypress JSON file, and I can go ahead and set my base URL. And this way I can actually use relative paths. It makes it a lot easier than to change later. This is actually a later slide, but I did want to explain why we're seeing that. You can see here, I've got my example test, and also I have my homepage spec. And again, this one, pull this one up, and it failed. So it failed because over here, we did not serve up our application. So we'll go ahead and serve it up. Angular build this, get it going. Excellent. And now I'm going to go ahead and rerun all the tests. And you can see that we successfully passed. We had no failures. Everything's good. It only took 0.72 seconds. And we have our standard CLI project showing here. So there's as I'm clicking here, we're not getting any interactions or any changes over here. It's pretty much just rendered and we're good. We'll get into this a little more. So we've got our first test running, super simple. able to prove out that it's working. All right, so we started a server. So this is one of the things that come up here. Let's have Cypress start the server. I don't really want to have to mess with this. That's the big no. This is an anti-pattern. Cypress execute can only run tasks that eventually exit, and ngserve does not exit on its own. Also with this, if you go down this path and you try to make this happen, you're probably going to run into port conflicts. You're going to create a little mini nightmare for yourself. So just don't do it. Have your scripts go ahead and first start up the server, and then go ahead and run Cypress against it, and then shut down the server, and not have that be part of Cypress.
Sounds like the voice of experience speaking here.
What have you guys experienced with this?
No, I'm saying, like, when you said you're creating a little special hell for yourself. Don't do that.
Yeah, I was very lucky, and I saw this very early on. It was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Don't do it. But I have been there with other test tools where I've gotten into this problem, and it's just not a lot of fun. So so we talked about with best practices with the Cypress JSON, set a base URL. I noticed with the newer versions of Cypress that it automatically creates a Cypress JSON for me, where the original version when I started working with, that was still a manual process. So that's nice little improvement. We already saw there when we kicked off our tests that a little warn when the server is not running. So I get a little bit of feedback there, especially like in an interactive mode, before I start kicking off tests and wondering why they're not running. What's really nice is that it can be overridden using the config flag. And this eliminates our hard-coded URLs. So here's the example of the JSON file. And then I can say, hey, Cypress run, and I can go ahead and change my config. I can set my base URL to now be localhost 4300, and it automatically will request from there. So this makes it really nice when I'm going from my local environment to my dev environment, test, stage, so on and so forth. I don't have to hard code anything. I can override this very, very quickly. Notice here, instead of open, we're using run. This is the non-interactive mode. This is where I'm going to get screenshots. I'm going to get videos. And this is what I'm going to use up on my CI server. So is that it? Is that enough to get you to switch to Cypress? Anybody?
I'm in.
You're in? I think those things alone are enough that are so cool that make it so much easier to work with. But there's a lot more to it. And we haven't even covered any of the good parts in my mind.
I think because that E2E testing traditionally has been rather difficult, from setup to execution time, the flakiness, all those things that you've already mentioned, that people shied away from it and really lost sight of what the value is of end-to-end testing, and that you can walk through exactly what a user is doing to verify that your application is fulfilling what they want. Sure, unit tests and integration tests are great, but they don't verify the user experience. And quite frankly, if users don't enjoy or can't use your application successfully, why does it exist?
Absolutely.
Why ship it in the first place?
Exactly. So, yeah. So where end-to-end tests fails, we kind of covered this a little bit earlier. They're slow. I can remember we had a project with, I think, about 1,000 protractor tests, and to run it across 3 browsers, I think took over 8 hours. And Internet Explorer always failed, without question. It was just always random failure in there, and it just got to the point where the problem with it being so slow, one is that as a developer, when I go through my PR process, I'm not really associating, if it's 8 hours later, that failure with my PR. It's too far apart. And then if we have multiples that are kicking off and they take 8 hours a piece, then we need to kind of cancel. Eventually what happens is either you're canceling the last run so you can run the new run, or you're only running your tests once a day. And that's typically what happens is we would run them starting at like 10 o'clock at night, and we'd run them until about 6 in the morning. So also what we talked about earlier, that seed or magic data, this is where end-to-end tests fail as well. The real power here, or the real problem, is how do I test all the little edge cases? So if this is this way, if this has this value and this other magical condition exists, I need the panel to show up like this, right? And so getting that data to the components in the correct way so that they can then render properly, a huge challenge. And this is again like a huge failure, which makes it tough to test those edge cases. And then since we're writing more and more code to create this magic data, we just create more and more fragile tests that are just bloated. It ends up being quite a mess. So introducing stubbed responses. So I think this is the most powerful thing with Cypress, and this should be the number one reason why you consider making the move from whatever you're using now, Protractor, Selenium WebDriver, to Cypress. So stubbed responses make it so much easier. So stubbing responses, it's recommended for most tests. I think that you should have one true end-to-end test. That's really what I would consider a smoke test. All it's going to do is go to the page and make sure that we didn't have any errors, that everything loaded and we didn't have a problem, and then stub all the other tests. This way I can actually test what's going on in the application. I can hit all of my edge cases. They're going to be very, very fast. I mean, since I don't have to wait for a server and I don't have to go create this magic data, I can stub what the responses are that are being received. It just amplifies how quickly I can run my tests. So, and again, because I don't have this magic data or seed set up, it's all that goes away. So stubbing is so simple. The first step for this is all I need to do is say Cypress, turn on the server. So Cypress server, that starts the server, and now it's going to start watching for stuff. Now I can go ahead and define routes. So this is a very verbose version of this, but I can go ahead and pass an object literal here. And I can say, hey, if there's any get methods that have a URL that looks like this pattern, users/*, then I want the response to be, and in this case here, it's just an empty array, but I can change what the response is going to be. So this is basically an HTTP intercept that as soon as my application is making, from my service call is making, using, let's say, $, or HTTP $, and it's making that call to, for the HTTP client to go get the data, it's going to intercept it at that moment at the browser and say, hey, we already have your data for you. And it's going to hand it back off.
And to be clear, that is mocking the browser's HTTP and not the Angular HTTP. So it's actually leaving the Angular space, making a request, and this is what's intercepting it and giving it a response.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's more real world, not just a mock within Angular.
Yes, that's a great point, because this isn't limited to just Angular. We can use this for any application, even if you're just using HTML and JavaScript.
Cool.
Exactly. As long as it runs in the browser, Cypress doesn't care otherwise. Yeah.
Excellent. So stubbing solves a lot of problems. The test speed is very, very fast. I get consistent results. I control what happens when a user requests this data, or when the application requests this data. As I said, the true end-to-end test can be smoke tests, just making sure that all my integration points are working. I don't have any errors. But there's more. There's more to this. All right. So fixtures, because the problem is that if I have to go in and hard code those responses everywhere, then now I have a new problem. I have a huge mess of data that's now integrated directly into my tests, and I have to now copy that data from test to test to test, and it becomes a little bit arduous to maintain that. So obviously the Cypress team thought about this and created the construct of fixtures. So I can go ahead and create a JSON users JSON file here, which if we come back, it's over here in our Cypress folder. I have fixtures, I have users. I can go ahead and what I like to do when I do this is actually just take a real response that has come back from the server, and I'll copy the response, the raw response out of my console dev tools, and I will go ahead and paste it in here and then kind of clean it up the way that I want. And I can make multiple versions of this. I can have users bad, users without address, or I can create different files for different scenarios. So with this here now, I can say this is more of a simplified syntax. I can say it's for get methods that match this syntax here of users /star, and the response that I want to use is go ahead and load the users JSON fixture and have that go ahead and return. Or if I think I'm going to be using this in multiple spots, the really nice thing I can do is say, okay, I want to go ahead and declare a fixture using the users JSON file as a, here's my alias users JSON. And now I can go ahead and use that alias fixture. The syntax is almost identical as the route up here, except for now I'm just specifying my alias for my users JSON. This makes it really nice and clean. I don't have to maintain what those responses are directly within my tests. I have a separation of concerns there, and I can pull that data in as needed.
This is beautiful.
Yeah, this is how you test edge cases. So now when we go back to my example I gave earlier about a product that has an inventory count of less than 10, okay, great. I go ahead and create that data. I say load this fixture, watch on this route, use this fixture. My component now is receiving the exact data that it needs so that I can get to that exact test case that I'm looking for on that page. And it's lightning fast.
Two questions. One is with fixtures. Are we limited to just a static JSON file, or would we potentially be able to create a function within here that would dynamically create the data for us, as maybe just a predicate type function where you could supply a function instead of just a path to a JSON file?
I'm going to have to defer here.
Yeah. My only use case so far has been using this fixture syntax here, but you can also provide other data right here. You don't have to use this syntax.
Okay.
Yeah, and you said having a function that dynamically creates it. Sure, that function will just just return the response when you need it right here, and that will also work.
Well, I think so if we go back to this here, you could actually have response, and you could point that to a function right here.
Okay.
That would generate that data, and so you could do that.
Okay.
Hey guys, I'm supposed to know if you can set the response header like 403.
Oh, to do errors and stuff. Yes, I believe that's possible.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say whatever Cypress can do, it better be able to return a 403 after it can.
Yeah. And also one other thing that's in the pipeline is a little bit down the line is full network stubbing. We want to be able to give the users the ability to change anything about a network call. So that's also another thing that's in the works.
I have two more questions, but as you're defining these different fixtures for the route, so if I go ahead and I have side out route, like the last line there in this example we're looking at, and I overwrite that later on. So if I create this as a default one that maybe is just running with all my tests, if I want to handle a scenario where I'm getting different data back, if I were to specify that same line with a different fixture or a different set of values at the end, is it a scenario where the last one I define wins so that I could essentially change that on an individual test basis? Or
yeah, you would want to set these on an individual test basis. Because the last one would be the one that's declared.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and another way to handle that is using a describe block. That's the way that we've been doing it, so that we can kind of manage it and say, okay, look, these tests are all encapsulated in here. I'm not sure if that's actually being enforced in Cypress as a global variable outside of that scope, but that's how we're managing it.
Okay.
Do you have any
you could have a before each, or before all, or something, or before hook, in that particular describe block, and that would make it work.
Yeah, that's how we've been controlling it, because we usually find that we need pretty much the same exact data from test to test, and then we just have small variations, right? Like, okay, now
Mhm.
on the user, all these other 8 pieces that we're not really testing in this current set here, we want those to all come in, and then we may then just load individual different versions of users to make sure that we're testing all of our use cases.
Exactly.
So.
And my last question, at least the ones that I have in my head right now, is errors. I know it was already asked about the 403s, but if you had something where you wanted something to fail to mimic, hey, I requested data, but it was a bad request, or that data wasn't available, or anything else, are you able to stub out failures for HTTP calls?
Yeah, you can have it return and not 200, and then you can do stuff based off that.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Great. All right. So here we've shown how we can use fixtures and how we can now get the right data to the right component at the right time and make sure that that works. But we haven't talked about how we resolve the timing issues. So one of the to me, this is the super powerful part with fixtures, is now we can wait for calls to return. So in my case here, I'm defining a couple different routes. I want to return a fixture for activities and messages. I want to go ahead and visit my dashboard, and then I want to wait, and I can pass an array of my aliases here. So get activities, get messages, and it will wait until both of those have returned before I kick off the next step in the test. So this is super powerful, especially when I have a very complicated user interface that's pulling data from a lot of different resources. I no longer have to choose that single element or that single deal like I'm having to do in Selenium or Protractor, where I'm having to wait for a particular element. I can say, no, actually wait for all of this data to complete before I allow the next step to go. So now what this does, and I think this is the part to really stress here, is my tests become very, very dependable, because there's no chance that it's going to go on to the next step before all the data is there. So I think this is a really important feature for developers. So let's take a look at a slightly more complicated version of this. So an autocomplete can be a little difficult to test. In our case here, we've declared a route called search. It's just, we've got hard-coded data here, so we're not actually using a fixture, but we're actually still aliasing and creating it as a fixture. As you can see here, that's called get search, and then we're using that alias down here. So now we're getting the autocomplete text box, and we're typing book. Now we're going to have Cypress wait for the get search to complete, and its URL should include search query book. So then I can, once that is completed and I get that back, now I can go on to my next step, which is for Cypress to get the results. It should contain book 1 and contain book 2. So using the wait here, just a great example of showing how the wait works, and that this next result would not occur. Having the getting the results and checking those would not occur until that wait is completed, and thus our tests are very reliable. We're not having these intermittent failures based on things that are taking a little bit longer to return.
And notice here, you're not adding any waiting or timeouts of any sort that you have to guess. There's no guesswork. There's no sleeping. There's none of that going on. Cypress just automatically waits for something to come about and then moves on.
Exactly. Yeah, that's because that's really the big problem with using a Selenium-based test tool, is that we're having to create these custom wait for elements, and or God forbid we're using something like a timeout to wait, some sort of interval to occur, because that just adds to the amount of time it takes for tests to run. It makes them more flaky. It's really indicative of a bigger problem that's going on when we have to use some sort of hack like that to get the test to work.
Exactly. And the reason why you have to do this with other frameworks like Selenium is that, they live completely outside of the browser. They don't live really inside the browser. But Cypress, since it runs in the same run loop as your application, it knows exactly what's going on in your application and it can react to it accordingly. That's why you typically don't need to configure timeouts or anything like that.
Excellent. All right, so we go take a look at a little bit more code over here. I think I've got. Let's go ahead and shut this down. Check out my first test, and all right. So here, I went ahead and wrote a few more tests, and this is actually against ngDoc.io. And I'm just going to get this out of the way so we can see. So we've changed where we're going out to our site ngDoc.io. So again, this isn't really a best practice. It'd be better um, to be using a base URL versus doing this, but instead of writing out a new website within the CLI project that I already have, just testing it against an existing site. So in this case here, input should allow search. So we're just showing that we can go ahead and use our selectors. We can go ahead and type into it. We can get the article, and we should have a length of 27. That's interesting that that's up there because we haven't started the server and the fixture. I think this one actually fails because we don't have anything set up yet. We'll actually kick this off in a second and see the stub test here, where I'm going ahead and starting my server. I'm using my creating a fixture for articles JSON and articles full JSON. So I have two different fixtures that I've created and aliased. And then I can go ahead and declare my route. So I want to watch the post. For the search, I want it to return nothing. And in this case here, when I type ngrx enter and get the article, it should have a length of 0. In my next example, I want it to have the post on search return articles JSON, and I'm going to go ahead and run the same exact test and get the article, and it should have a length of 3. So now I'm controlling this one should have this JSON file has 3 in it. It should render all 3 of those. Very easy to do that. And then also I can do the same exact thing here where I'm doing the full JSON. I'm running the same exact test, except for now I should expect that I have 26. So if we go ahead and kick this off. All right, here. Actually, they're already should be already running, right? Yep. Oh. Where? Is that behind? Nope. All right, we're gonna stop this and. Oh. Type open. All right, and then we're going to go out to ngDoc.io spec. This is now running. All right, so it looks like we have an error here with one of our aliases, which we'll take a look at in just a second. And you see here that we found 27, but we expected 26. So if we want to go test or fix our tests here, it's actually 27 articles that are coming back. And then notice it's firing off. It's rerunning the test. I don't have to go kick it back off again. It automatically is just running for us. So we see we've got past tests for stub data calls, but we're having a problem here on this search that the route could not find a registered alias for articles JSON. So let's go back over to our test really quick and take a look at that. Oh, I accidentally added a tick in there and thus causing it to fail.
Yeah, but those error messages.
Looks like there's another one. There's another.
Yeah, it looks like we got another we got a tick at the back of it. Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, what's great here is these error messages. It's like I don't have to go dig through a stack trace to figure out what's going wrong. I get a really nice output.
And I'm actually glad you got these errors, because that's where all this is useful.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't have to guess. I didn't have to dig around through that stack trace to figure out like, oh yeah, it's looking for there's actually 27, not 26, and it gave me pretty good clues, with having those tick marks in there. If we put those back in and we take a look at it, this is just from a development perspective. This just makes it so much faster. I'm able to figure out what's wrong with tests. And so when I actually look at this, so for alias, you can see there's a tick mark there and a tick mark there. Oh, okay, great. And it also tells me what available aliases are. So I don't have to go dig and try to figure out what aliases are available. So it's really useful feedback for me as a developer, understanding what's possible, what might be wrong, and give me some really nice clues about how to fix this error. All right, so we'll go ahead and set that back. That's all run. In summary, I think this is a big departure from where we've all been, that UI tests can now be dependable and can actually be part of our development process. Where before, I think most projects started out with this really altruistic, hey, we're going to do it right this time. We're going to have end-to-end tests. Things are going to be great. And then after a while, when we kind of get worn down with tests that are flaky and not dependable, that we just give up on it. But Cypress really allows us to have UI tests that can be dependable. We can run them side by side, in our CI with our unit tests and have really good results. End to end in small amounts is okay. And when I say end to end, what I'm really referring to there is unstubbed calls. Unstubbed calls in small amounts are okay. I think it's really important that we test all of our integration points and do these what I would call smoke tests. But stubbing is really the way to go. If I want to hit all of my edge cases and be able to make sure that my component is going to interact with itself, well as with other components, stubbing is the way to go, so I can control the data that's coming into each one of those components and get through all of those edge cases and do it very, very quickly. And in that complex interactions are manageable. You can see here, I think the autocomplete example is a great one of like, okay, hey, look, we can have these more complex interactions. And it was actually really easy to test. Because of, I think you made the great point there where since it's directly integrated into the browser and we're not having to wait for elements, we can actually know when the HTTP calls are done, that these complex interactions just become so much more easy.
Yeah, your test just becomes your user story pretty much. So you're not going through the whole, you're not always going through the technical thinking of how you should test something. Just go about, hey, I'm on this page. What would a user do? How would their story and journey go through your app? So you can think about it along those terms.
Yeah, excellent point.
Interactions, guys. Do we have time for one last question?
Absolutely.
Sean wants to know, and this might be a long question. I know we're already kind of running over, so maybe we point him in the right direction rather than going into detail about this. But Sean has a site that requires authentication through a third party, so there's a redirect for the user login. Is that something that Cypress can handle, or is that in the path forward?
Yes. If you look in our docs, we have a best practices section where we talk about this. Our own dashboard service uses Google and GitHub login. So yeah, this is a common question we get, and that's why we have a documentation on it now. If you go to the Cypress site and just type in single sign-on or best practices section, you'll find a bunch of information about this.
You're so great, Amir. Okay, do me a favor. I want you to go. Psh.
Is that a podcast thing for
actually no, I joke? My teenage daughter, whenever I ask her to do something that's so easy, she goes
That's awesome. Hey, also feel free. You can reach out to me at JesseS_Breebug on Twitter. You can send me a direct message or just post something out to me. Be happy to answer your questions. If I'm not able to answer it, obviously the Cypress team can jump in there as well. But happy to help people, show them how to use this. We're actively doing training around Cypress. And actually at ngConf, myself and Joe Eames are doing a 2-hour workshop, I believe, on Thursday at ngConf.
Do you guys still have tickets available? And can you turn off your screen share so we can see your wonderful face?
Oh, absolutely.
For that?
There we are.
No, that's my face. There you go.
All right, turn off screen share. Is it off?
Yeah.
Right. There we go. We're good. Excellent. Awesome.
And we have Connie. Connie, can you say hi? Because you missed the introductions and we're excited to have you. So if you want to just say hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Connie.
Hi, Connie.
It's hard for me to join because it's like 1 a.m. Yeah, most of the time I fell asleep.
Well,
no worries. Yeah, thanks for joining.
Okay, and I just want to say one real quick thing, and then we will wrap up. You guys, so it's actually a funny story, but I'm going to tell you the super quick version of this funny story because I have been hearing so much about Cypress because I'm friends with Jesse, right? And I've been hearing about Cypress everywhere, and I actually have friends, a couple of other meetup organizers who are friends. So someone sent me an introduction to the Cypress team. Like, we could actually go straight to the Cypress team, and I got Amir's email, and I was super excited, and I asked him to come on ngHouston and do a show for us, and then I accidentally booked him on Angular Air instead. So it was super funny. I got a kick out of it anyway. So next week, Amir is going to be a guest on Angular Air, and we're super excited about that. So everybody tune into Angular Air next week to see Amir, and he's going to teach us more stuff about Cypress.
I look forward to it.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay, Connie. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to mention Angular Malaysia in July.
Yes.
It's the first Angular conference in Southeast Asia. Jocelyn and her volunteers are doing a fantastic job. 2-day conference, 2 tracks, 18 speakers, and the CFP is still open. I think the deadline is March 17, Malaysia time.
When is that? Conference is in July?
July 6 and 7 is Saturday and Sunday.
I love Jocelyn.
Yeah.
I'm very excited to hear about that, and I have never been to Malaysia, but it sounds really cool. But I have to check my calendar, but I think I'm going to submit a talk for that. Are you going to be there, Connie?
I haven't. I'm still undecided. I'm hoping Ben Lesh will be there. If he goes, I'll definitely go. And if Tracy is there, I'll definitely go.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and you know Ben Lesh watches this show, obviously.
Oh, does he?
No.
Oh.
All right. Well, just in case Ben Lesh is watching, Ben, get your ass to NG Malaysia because Connie would like to meet you. And but I hope you are there because I would love to be there, and maybe we'll meet you. And if not, we'll see you again on ngHouston. It's really nice to have you. And Jesse and Mike and Amir, it's really nice to have all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll tell my colleague tomorrow, or maybe today.
There you go. There you go. All right, Jesse, thanks again for putting together that awesome talk. That was really good. I learned so much today, and I really appreciate your time. I appreciate all of you. Thank you for joining us for ngHouston, and we'll see you all next time.
All right.
All right, great. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.